wanted to get together a panel of experts. We have Stephen, we have An, we have Ken here, all from very different backgrounds, right? Stephen is an OV who's moved back to Vietnam. Back in the early OG days when people weren't even thinking about Vietnam as an option yet. Right? We have An, who's now helping hundreds of OVs finding jobs and recruiting here in Vietnam. And then we have Ken, you might have seen him on YouTube and on social media. Ken really focuses on promoting Vietnam and then also different ways for you to move back, coming from his legal and advisory background. So yeah, we're gonna tackle both the moving part and then the legal side of things. So what I'll do is for each section, I'll ask 5 to 6 questions to our speakers, and then I'll open it up for Q&A. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. Let me turn this on for you. This one's good. All right, so before we start, would love to hand over the mic to each speaker to do a quick 1-minute intro about your story, your career, and yeah, just overall your OV journey.
Okay. So my name is Ken Yu. I'm a California licensed attorney. Manufactured in Vietnam in 1981, exported to the United States in 1985, re-imported back to Vietnam in 2013, and now I'm fully distributed in Vietnam with a family and kids. I run a law firm called Duong Global Business Consulting Group. We have offices in California, here in Vietnam, in Thailand, Singapore, and we're opening Dubai soon, in case you need to move your money legally around. And so pretty much, I mean, the session here is I'm going to handle a lot of the legal matters, such as immigration, citizenship, buying real estate. If you go to A+ and you get tested for drugs, I can get you out as well. Things like that. So any legal questions you have, I'll be happy to answer. And if I can just plug a little bit on my YouTube channel. Has anybody seen my YouTube channel? Okay, okay. Well, 80% of you are not subscribed to my channel. So I need you to subscribe to get to 200,000. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
I may want to get your contact. Hi everyone, my name is An, and as Nick has introduced, I'm a founder and MD of Janus. Janus is an executive search firm. We are headquartered in Hong Kong, but we have a very strong presence across Southeast Asia, and Vietnam is one of our largest markets. I myself is not an OV. I was born here. I grew up here until I was about 16 years old, and then I went to the States for studies, and then I came back here roughly about 2012, 2013, around the same time as you. Yeah, and I've worked in large corporates in Vietnam, and then it's about 6 years ago. I have 3 kids, and about 6 years ago I decided that I've had enough of the corporates. I may do something different. So that was the reason why Janus was born. And actually, when I was with TechComBank before, I was their head of talent acquisition for TechComBank. And when I told the chairman that, Chairman, I love you very much, but I don't think I can continue flying back and forth between Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. So Chairman of TechComBank told me that if you cannot work for me full time, how about you just start something and support me? And that was how Janus was built from the start. And now it has, I actually just looked at our database the other day, and I was a bit amazed also at our own team effort. We've had probably over 800 overseas Vietnamese that we've talked to and inspired to come back to Vietnam in some way. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm very excited to see that wave keep coming. So hopefully I'll share some, insight with you today so that we can enable, the next move to Vietnam.
Awesome, good.
Right. So hello everyone. My name is Stephen. I am born and bred in Australia, in Melbourne. So I grew up over there. Didn't speak a word of Vietnamese besides Mẹ Gorai. I spent my entire career in banking. And through the wonderful era that was COVID, I got approached by this wonderful lovely lady and her team to come to TechComBank to support the chairman's wishes of uplifting talent at TechComBank. True fact, we've shared this with Ken before, I can't read Vietnamese, I can't write Vietnamese. And yet I have hopefully a relatively successful career here in Vietnam in Techcombank still. I'm happy to answer any particular questions about my journey, but we have a wonderful panel. I hope that you do ask us really challenging questions to help you through this particular journey.
Basis. So first, I think when it comes to finding a job in Vietnam, we're hearing about economic growth, we're hearing about different sectors growing at the same time, but I think the common question I always get from OVs is it's so hard to find a job. When I go on LinkedIn, I see nothing. When I apply for a job, I'm not sure if I'm even qualified. So maybe the first question for Stephen and Ann here is, what are the hottest jobs right now that you're seeing, especially for overseas Vietnamese to move back?
Sure. So I think, I'm not sure if you've watched some of the podcasts I do before on opportunities in Vietnam, but I continue to see that some of the areas in Vietnam still lack a lot of talent, and they still open up for expats and overseas Vietnamese. Number one would be in the research and development category, and you're talking about R&D across many different industry, R&D in technology, R&D in food manufacturing, in FMCG. The R&D capabilities in this market is very low. So within the R&D, we still continue to have to look for people from outside of the market, and I think that's continued to be one of the hottest spots moving forward, as Vietnam is looking into increase the expense and the investment into R&D, and moving the nation from a lower values labor towards the more higher value labor. So I think R&D space definitely one of the hottest spot. Another category that I see is no matter, regardless of the industry you are in, but the ability to manage at scale is something that the local talent pool continue to be lacking. So when I mention manage at scales, I'm talking about, if you look at the slides from McKinsey before, you would see that about 97% of our corporates in Vietnam are SME. So we lack the talent pool who understand how to scale business. And a lot of the Vietnamese conglomerates right now, once they reach the ceilings of the Vietnam markets, they want to go outside of Vietnam. They do not have talent who knows how to do it. So managing at scale, either is in revenue scale, either is in team scale, manage a lot team, or whether it's in product scales, consumer scales, continue to be something that we don't have talent enough in Vietnam, and we have to go outside of Vietnam. And another areas that this year I've seen a recurring theme is helping Vietnamese company going global, and I think those kind of jobs will be in the demand. So for example, a lot of the roles that I've seen is global BD jobs, where you bring Vietnamese company to other markets outside of Vietnam, or CEOs of a foreign branch of a Vietnamese company. So something like that continue to be an area in demand. I think it will be coming more and more in demand as a lot of the Vietnamese conglomerates continue to expand their presence and aspire to go outside of Vietnam. I think we've heard a lot about technology and data, and I must say that there's the misperception that we don't have tech and data talent in Vietnam. We have a lot of tech and data talent in Vietnam, but when it comes to the technology leadership or the data leadership, or the vision of how you build a long-term technology infrastructure for a company, then again, we don't have that talent in this market. We have a lot of executor, like a lot of the experts at those level, but in order to take a company longer, or go bigger scale, again, we come back to the managing at scale category. We don't have those talents. So those continue to be the area where overseas Vietnamese will bring more values.
100%. So for those who've seen me speak before, I'm very honest, very transparent about my observations of this, but I want to reiterate what Anne said about talent. So essentially, if you can imagine the local workforce, they are very, very good at execution. The tech talent here is amazing. They learn how to do it very, very quickly and they can execute. But the talent gap in the market right now is around thought leadership, innovation, and so forth. A good way of thinking that is we are very fortunate right now in Vietnam that there's a lot of investment into technology. So a bank like Techcombank, for example, we have completely transformed our technology stack, basically putting every top technology into the system. We basically put all global talent from Singapore, Australia, the US, Canada, France, the UK to come and embed that. The next part is what to do next. So the creation of a bank, the creation of an organization is relatively easy because you duplicate policies, procedures from other organizations. But when you want to become leading, essentially you need to find thought leadership. You need to go into the market and truly find people who can lead at scale, who can think differently, and more importantly, create the teams that can think differently as well. So how do you create the mindset of young talent or local talent to start asking the questions why? For those who really were born here and follow the education system, we have a very structured education system in Vietnam where people tell you this is the black and white answer. I don't know about whether in Australia, for example, or overseas, we used to call them the Asian subjects. Maths, sciences, where everything was black and white. All of a sudden, we're now transforming a culture where our employees are asking how or why should we do this, and starting to challenge the status quo. Once the system has been embedded, how do we truly innovate for the next kind of advancement for an organization, especially when it comes to AI? So again, when we talk about finding talent and when we spend money going over in recruiting, for example, we look for truly thought leadership. We look for leadership on scale. We look for people who have tried and failed and done different things, essentially. We don't look for doers and executioners anymore.
Yeah, and another part I wanted to add is we hire a lot in the financial service and banking sector, and one of the things that has been coming back to us for the past 5 years is the digital transformation. And you've heard about that, I assume, about digital transformation. So the talent in the digital transformation space is also very lacking in the local pool. So for those jobs, we still need to go outside of Vietnam, either OV or expat talent. And actually, the Vietnamese banking industry right now, Techcombank is one of the first mover, but right now, all of the banks are talking about digital transformation pretty much around the same time. So, there is certainly a very huge demand for, talents in the digital transformation space, just because a lot of the players in the markets are moving at the same time and requiring the similar skill set. Yeah. So that one also is another area of hot jobs.
Gotcha. So let's assume that we, folks in the room, a lot of them have built experience overseas in US, Europe, Australia. Now they're approaching the 8th or 10th year mark of their career, and they're very interested in moving back to Vietnam. If we were to demystify the Vietnamese job market, right, and say these are the best channels to reach out to people who are great managers who can get you hired, what are some ways or actionable tips you would give to folks in the room?
My first kind of immediate reaction is you have to know Anne.
And my team.
Her team is absolutely amazing. She's well connected. She has a great presence. She's extremely supportive of making sure that our movies transition very, very well. But across Vietnam, there are a lot of wonderful headhunters, recruitment specialists that actually are trying their hardest to bring overseas talent across. And they have the positive intent, not just to fill a particular tick the box, but they're trying to find the best talent, not just for an organization, but to out this country. And to them, that's really important, right? And the wonderful thing that was shocked to me is how close, tight-knit that recruitment community really is. They talk to each other and they support each other to make sure that they will find the right suitable roles for you. So again, if you can't find a direct role in an organization, the best bet is to find all these recruiters and organizations to get your presence and brand out there. Right? And hopefully the communication will start to spread.
For sure. Like if you are able to get in touch with recruiters in Vietnam, it's a simple search away. You can get in touch and then really demonstrate your profile. And I think it's sort of almost like you are the magnet, right? You already have built this capability, this experience, and now recruiters are helping you attract different companies who need to know about your profile. Because if you're based 12 hours in a different time zone, it's really hard for them to really find you through LinkedIn. Yep. Yeah, got it. Okay, so maybe for Ken, I'd love to ask you, you're also seeing a lot of Viet Kiels thinking about moving back to Vietnam to start a business. You've started F&B businesses yourself. Is that something that you're seeing more and more?
So yes, so I was actually going to talk about that to see who's actually thinking about being an entrepreneur, or who is already an entrepreneur now. Okay, good. Corporate life is good too. I mean, I know he is. He does business. But for folks who are, I've seen many folks do soft landing through a corporate job here in Vietnam, and then through the time they're working to also find an entrepreneurial investment opportunity, franchising, opening up something you always wanted to open. Maybe it's just a coffee shop, but something you want to get into. So I do see that a lot now amongst the probably 30 to 40-year-olds who are coming back, and then they're opening, especially in technology, opening up software development companies. That seems to be a pretty good option. That's the clients I see. Professional services, digital marketing companies as well. There are a couple that open up professional accounting firms, law firms. And then of course the big space is really F&B, right? Opening up the restaurant you always want to open, the coffee shop, the bar. A lot of bar owners as well here in Vietnam. So it takes a matter of a little bit of, I guess, bravery, or a little bit of relationships and friendships that you would have. And the capital is not that much compared to in the Western or developed countries, because there are less regulations here. So if you were to take a chance, Vietnam would be a great place to do your 5 to 12. Don't quit your day job. Open a business and also run your day job, so you at least have some income.
Just to double click on that, Ken. So for a lot of folks, when they think about F&B in Vietnam, they think that's like a 5-year minimum commitment, right? And then also, it's super competitive here. People are so trendy, there's so many spots building up all the time, customers have low loyalty. Like what have you seen in the market? And then from your own experience operating F&B, like how are you sort of really transforming the consumer taste, or like adapting to consumer taste?
So I would just say, don't think so big all the time. Right? I always think putting all your eggs in one basket, one business has to be $1 million a year in revenue. But what Trung Nguyen's leader, Đặng Lê Nguyên Vũ, said, I can open up 1,000 shops that make $1,000, and that's over 100 million a year. I get a valuation of $1 billion. Not every business needs to make a ton of money. So I have a chain of coffee shops that makes $500 a month. My goal is to have 100 of them. I have $50,000 a month. Okay? I have a chain of spas, and it sounds small. It makes $4,000 a month. If I have 10, that's $40,000 a month. So when you really look at the consumer base in Vietnam, 100 million, and then all the expats coming in, I'll give you a secret. Da Nang is the place to go invest in. Less competition, growth in expats, remote workers, higher spending, IFC, there's all these reasons. So you can go to a market that is growing, is less competitive, to open, right? And in the F&B space, you do not have to be the best coffee shop in town. You just have to have good delivery, quick delivery, and find one item or like a coffee bean that's very special, right? Because the market is so big, there's enough room for growth, right? I think coming from the United States and many developed countries, they think you have to be the biggest innovator around, a market disruptor, but really you don't, to have enough money to survive, be happy, stay with your family, and have the freedom of time. That's truly an entrepreneur, right? Where you can, so I come from a different perspective. I actually never worked for corporate before. I opened my law firm when I was 27 years old. I got one present once from a partner because I did good work, but that's it. Right? So if on the entrepreneurial path, it's a matter of just sticking to it, think small but scale. Opening up many little, so Guza Cafe. Has anybody seen Guza Cafe? They're small little kiosks, they're tiny. There's coffee, Hai Mi Hai Met, right? They're going very small but proliferate around. There are matchas that sell in the streets where they ride their bicycles. So thinking about what our traditional parents used to sell, tofu, now you modernize it with the most hip drinks. So you don't have to really think big, you don't have to be the most disruptor, but you just need to start and you need to be consistent. Of course, marketing and branding I think are very key, and then having enough capital, doubling it so you can stay alive long enough to reap the benefits of the profits. That would be the main. I can go into more details about the industries, but if I keep generally about the entrepreneurial spirit on how to be successful, and it's okay to lose some businesses. Like I have 3 successes, 1 failure. I'm okay with it, as long as you're positive for the year and your wife is cool with it. You can do it for next year.
That's one thing I notice about Vietnamese in general. We love side quests. Everyone has 3 or 4 different engagements all at once, right? Like you're working full time, you're running a coffee shop, you're thinking about operating on, you're posting on social media, you're building an e-commerce shop. There's so many different ways to build experience and operate in Vietnam. So one question I do have now for Anne and Stephen is, when people are moving back from Western countries, oftentimes we hear about the golden handcuffs. I'm making so much money, my compensation structure is very well defined in North America or in Europe, right? And if I'm going back to Vietnam, there is an expectation that there could be a cut. So how have you seen OVs navigating that? And is there something that's true or incorrect here about this assumption?
Yeah. So my personal experience. So my entire career in Australia was working for the National Australia Bank. To be quite fair, I had a very successful career. Rise very quickly from the ground up as a young graduate all the way to senior management. And during the heart of COVID, I didn't want to stay there anymore, and I was essentially poached. Without giving away the figure, and only Anne knows this figure, I earn now 4 times what I earned in Australia. Because for companies like Techcombank that truly invest in talent, I get paid in USD, I get paid for my accommodation. I live, for those who know in Hanoi, I live in Long Bean, Riverside. The bank pays for my kids' education. I have 2 girls, both of them go to international school. I get paid for car, I get a trip home every year and so forth. Mobile phones, car loans, everything like that, all that adds up to what we call total compensation. So in addition to base pay, in addition to my preferential stock that I get for the bank if I do well, I get all these wonderful benefits that add up as well. Compound that with all of the things that you've discussed, which is the cost of living in Vietnam, everything starts to add up. So in terms of total comp, 4x what I would have earned in Australia, compounded by the fact that the cost of living here is exceptionally affordable. So that rumor, again, my own experience, is not really true. Now, that's not fair to say for every organization. Some who are still established that don't have an existing strategy for hiring overseas Vietnamese or expats might have compensation built on local pay, so pay in VND, for example. They might not be structured in terms of having all these wonderful expat benefits, so that is part of your negotiation as well. The question is, what value do you bring overseas that requires you to be here, and what support do you need? Which I'm sure you'll ask later on. But things like what is good for your family, what is good for your lifestyle, what are the things that you don't necessarily want to forego, and in order for you to contribute back to your country, contribute back to the organization, it is a requirement for you from an organization. So those are the things you want to reflect on as well as you negotiate your total compensation.
Right. I'm really glad that we did the job with you. So I think to answer that, not from a personal perspective, but from a more consolidated views that we've had with OVs coming back to Vietnam, I think there are a few points, right? And that statement of when you move back from developed markets to Vietnam, you need to trade off in terms of total comps. That statement is both true and false. Yeah. So if I've worked in a Vietnamese corporate for more than 15 years, and this is what I see. So if about 15 years ago, if you look at the salary benchmarking of a lot of Vietnamese companies, they do salary benchmarking in Vietnam. So they take data salary of all companies in Vietnam and they do data benchmarking in Vietnam. What has changed now is that a lot of the company, for example, Techcombank and a lot of other large company, they are now doing regional data benchmarking. So they are benchmarking their salary and their total comps against other markets such as Singapore, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and some other companies, especially the large Vietnamese conglomerates, they are doing global benchmarking, which means benchmarking against the US, against Europe, Australia, salaries. And that was the reason why companies like Techcombank are able to design a structure that can attract talent from other developed markets back to Vietnam. So it really depends on the stage of the company and their reward philosophy. So a lot of the companies in Vietnam, their reward philosophy is that we don't need to hire overseas, we only need to hire in Vietnam. For those companies, if you want to come back to Vietnam, you may need to take a cut. Yeah, if you love the company, if you think it's a great fit for you, but they are not prepared to pay overseas package, you may need to take a pay cut. But for companies who are prepared to hire overseas talent or expat talent, they are already having that, salary benchmarking against, other developed markets. They will be able to match. Yeah, I have seen my candidates be it offer 30%, 40% higher than what they're currently earning in the US, in Australia, in Europe before. But those only apply for very high impact jobs and also applies for companies who are ready to pay that salary and who have a reward philosophy that they will hire globally. And in Vietnam, to be very frank, and it's a sad story, not many companies are like that. Yeah, and I think right now the highest paying industries that we can name is probably in banking and financial services sectors. So hopefully it will continue to improve, in the future. But what I could say right now is Vietnam is a lot of the Vietnamese companies right now are paying even higher than Indonesians and Malaysians and Philippines companies. So a lot of companies right now, when we hire talent in the regional market, we are going after Malaysians and Indonesians and the Philippines because they are cheaper than Vietnam. So that is something that is changing in the salary and in the compensation markets in Vietnam. But again, it really comes back to what was your intrinsic motivation of coming back to Vietnam. Now, if the total comps combined with the motivation and combined with the company makes sense to you, then the cut would not be as a cut. It would be a transition and it would be an adjustment if you look at it that way. Yeah. I told Stephen just right before we went to this panel was that we had this very painful experience with talent from Australia. Because I remember one case we were hiring in Australia for one of our clients in Vietnam. The clients offered 40% plus on whatever he was earning in Australia, but the candidate turned down because I divided that by hours, and I think wage per hour is about 20% less. Because in Australia, obviously, you work 4 days a week, and you get off the office at 2 p.m. to go watch the sunset and so forth. So when he put that down on the table and he calculated per hours, he said my wage per hour is less than, is 20% less. So if your intrinsic motivation is not there, any increase wouldn't make any sense because it's a total different environment. So to answer your question, that would be how I would approach it.
So I would love to now open this up to Q&A. Anything related to planning for a move, interviewing, compensation, running a business. Yeah, maybe the first question.
Yeah, thank you. So, hey, my name is Tran. I'm already living here 3 years now. I have several companies, and I somehow struggle sometimes to find the right people, especially in leading positions. And this is why we still choose to hire people in Brazil. I have people in Netherlands. I have people in Italy working for the company here. We fly them in 1-2 times per year, but I'm struggling with paying them salaries. So I have to go the other way around, that they have to send me invoices. Do you know if there are already possibilities? Am I just being wrong consulted? Because everyone told me this is the way to go, or can I really pay them salaries from the company here because they are employees of the company in Ho Chi Minh City, but not actually living here?
I think you can answer from the legal perspective.
Yeah. Really bit challenging.
Trying to figure the diplomatic way. So you have clients around the world who are different nationalities doing work here in Vietnam on a short-term basis?
Yes,
like
they work full-time.
Okay. For short-term, how long?
Already now, 1 year, 2 years. So
okay, that's long-term.
Yeah. But we always get invoices. But I fly them in, but they stay in Brazil, Netherlands. But I want to provide them a salary and everything. I'm not sure if it's possible.
And you want to deduct taxes out of your Vietnam entity rather than separate ones? Okay. Do they have work permits?
Not yet.
Okay, I can't talk anymore.
Maybe a private session.
The question is what is needed.
No. So if you want to legalize it to pay them here, you have to legalize the immigration side to give them sufficient paperwork, or else you keep everything offshore and form another entity, where they are employed in that company because they're legally not allowed to work in Vietnam. And the laws are getting tighter on that regarding remote workers and having TRCs and valid work permits to even come into the country. So that probably have to be a separate conversation on the legal side.
Another option you have is fire them and work with recruitment agencies and we'll find you people in Vietnam.
Hire through you and then, just like a short-term basis.
Hello, this is John, and I have two questions. One for career, one for legal, given we are career people. So on career, the first one could be quite vague, but just in general, how long does an OV says he or she want to find a job? How long would that job seeking period be usually in Vietnam market? And the second one is more legal because I'm also trying to look for some opportunities here in Vietnam. And I have been keep hearing some people tell me some firms, they can pay you in a way that you don't need to pay tax. So how does that work actually in the market?
That's an illegal question.
Okay. So I think normally if you already start thinking about coming back, it's never too late to talk to people. But before you talk to people, you need to be prepared that if there is an opportunities, you need to be able to move within 3 months of time. Because once you've talked to, for example, if you talk to a recruiter like us, so if you talk to our clients, the companies who have the jobs, normally they would expect you to be ready within 3 months. And that's normally the notice period that most of the company would expect. So I think it really depends on how ready you are, and once you feel like you're ready internally, as mentally, and also you've talked to your families, you've talked to all of the important parts of your life, and you feel like you're ready, start that process now. And once be in the ready mindset that once there is an opportunity, you're willing to go. So normally, when we do talent mapping for our clients, we normally give priorities to people who are short-term motivation. Short-term motivation means they are willing to move back to Vietnam within 6 months. And that would be a higher prioritized category for our clients when they look at talent. So from a hiring perspective, 3 months. From the candidate perspective, it also depends on what areas you're looking for jobs, right? There are areas that are highly competitive in the local market. So for example, if you are in marketing, the local talent pool is really rich. So normally we don't hire OV for marketing, except for very unique skill set in marketing, like MarTech, for example. But for marketing, or for lower jobs or mid-management job in data and tech, we don't hire OV. We don't hire expats. We only hire local talents. So depending on the areas where you're sticking for a job, it may take shorter or longer. I would say that for mid-manager up, the realistic timeline will be within 6 to 12 months to land an appropriate one.
Oh, good. Next question.
You don't want to answer the hard one.
The question regarding how to not pay taxes or to minimize taxes. How much you want to pay?
I just want to try to understand how it exists in the market.
Sure. So first of all, if you're working for a company here, then you have to get a work permit, which and if you work for a year and above, then you need to have a labor contract. It'll be subject to the Vietnamese employment taxes and law. If you work for a short period, you can be under a foreign contract, which is roughly a 20% withholding for most foreign workers, except for some industries, it can be down to 10%. But here's the trick. If you're a remote worker doing work for a foreign company, but just based in Vietnam, not providing any services to a Vietnamese person, or a company, or generating revenue, then you don't have to pay taxes if you live here less than 183 days per year, which is a tax residency. Okay, that's how you don't pay taxes here, because you don't have a legal obligation to do it.
It's a very complex matter, so if you want, you need to talk to him in private. but I can share the experience of most of my candidates. It also depends on your tax residency and your citizenship. So for example, a lot of my candidates coming from the US and Australia, we do have a non-double tax treaty between Vietnam and the US and Vietnam and Australia. So you don't get taxed double, but you need to pay the tax gap. And in the companies they do have advisors that support you in terms of figuring out how much tax you need to pay. But another ways my clients are doing with some very like experts but very high paid jobs, and they want to but they want to minimize the tax. It can go through different routes in terms of service contract, but that won't be applied for very long-term engagement. I think that would be quite risky for long-term engagement.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Bill. My family runs Silverland Hospitality, which is the leading hospitality group in Saigon. And I'm the second generation, and I have a big motivation to hire more OVs because I understand that they understand the Vietnamese culture to help with promoting our hospitality, and also they have that foreign mindset, right? But in the past, I run into a problem where, okay, I run through all the TRC, I got them to the job, and then they quit 3 months later because the work culture is so drastically different from what they're used to, and it costs me a lot as an employer to go through all of these troubles and then have them come and then they say, oh, it's not a good fit, like you guys are not whatever, you guys are not like what I thought you could be. So any tips on easing that transition of an overseas Vietnamese to where they feel like they can actually integrate into a company?
You want to share your
Part of my day job is after we recruit talent into an organization, how do I ensure that I manage them well? Which one of it is actually how to retain talent to the organization. So emphasizing what Anne said before you recruit, you really need to dissect the intrinsic motivation for somebody to come work in the organization. And to be fair, be as honest and transparent to them about what the expectation is going to be. Right? For some of us, Anne and her team was wonderful. They were very explicit to say, Stephen, there is no work-life balance. There is no equal balance that you would expect in Australia. Right? Where everyone in Australia is working 4-day work weeks, really chill, working remotely from home, 1 day into the office. The expectation has to shift where you are in the office every single day, Monday to Saturday. Be very clear about what that cultural change is going to be. Yeah, we're Saturday, yep. Hence the pay. But setting that particular expectation and go, okay, what is going to be the reasons for them to come work? The other part to it is what is the opportunity for them long term? So from talent retention, what is the talent development perspective? So what is the progression for them in the organization they work for? What are opportunities for them to use it as a stepping stone across the industry, for example? What is the expected commitment? So Techcombank is very adamant about this is the expectation of most expats. They come in, they transfer their global best practices and so forth, but the tenure isn't forever for most people. There's an obligation that you contribute that knowledge as fast as possible to the local market, and then you move on. And some of us will stay forever and move on to different roles and transition, but being very clear about what that expectation is going to be. So focusing again on the motivation, development opportunities, the progression opportunities, and so forth, and hopefully have that conversation up front before they commit. Because once they're in, then it's very hard to retain unless you constantly pay them more and more and more, which becomes a very detrimental exercise for you as a business owner.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to add on that is that this is just practical tips, right? I've also seen a lot of companies, they hire, it also depending on the maturity of your organizations in terms of, how international your organization currently is. If your organization is testing out jobs for OV or is testing out positions that you hire from outside of the market, the most practical and safest way would be to land them in a short-term contract first, have them try that out for 3 to 6 months. for both sides to evaluate each other before you go into the lengthy process of applying for TRC and work permit and such, if that's what you wanted to test out. But that's just a practical thing, like just a practical tactics, right? But apart from the practical tactics, I think, you know, another more systematic ways you look into your organization is that having more comprehensive evaluations of, you know, what is the culture looks like, what kind of, you know, culture would you like to build, and what kind of people would be, you know, a good fit for that culture. You need to identify that first before you go out and hire them. And then, you know, and then once you have already the DNA identified and you know exactly what it takes for that person to survive in your company, then you go and interview and find people that match that DNA. Before you have that identified and you just go out randomly talking to people, you may fall into the traps that they can be very good functionally, they know their fields very well, but they don't have that DNA that you look for in terms of personality, in terms of culture, in terms of, you know, the resilience you require. So I think a lot of the companies, once they enter into the journey of hiring expats and OV, normally it goes through a very painful process of having a lot of the fail case, and they learn from it, and they start building, you know, the support system around it. One expat or one OV cannot change the whole company. And that is the most unrealistic expectation from a lot of the chairman and CEO that I've seen when they hire OV. So I think, you know, in order to make a successful case, for example, Techcombank was able to do, was that they hire in storm. They hire a lot, it's a collective effort of a lot of OV and expat that shift the culture from a local to a more global one. And that takes a long time. So I think, you know, in order for your company, your family business to be able to hire successfully expats, it's really, you need to look internally and see what kind of DNAs would make your company become successful, and then go and hire people that enable that DNA. So that is a more, strategic way to look at it, but the more practical way would be try them out on a 6-month basis.
Sorry, I just sit close by, so I won't hold the microphone. My case is a little bit different because I'm asking about an OV that have 2 citizenship. So in that case, is there any recommendation for the career and legal process that one's to go through? Because I know that for the salary negotiation, it will be different from local Vietnamese to deal with the recruiter. So I just want to know that for career and legal process, is there any recommendation? That's my question.
She has a dual citizenship.
Yes. I mean, if you have a Vietnamese citizenship, from a paperwork standpoint, it's much easier. They don't have to apply for work permit or TRC. So it's much, but of course, I mean, you can probably talk to the pay regarding the pay difference between a local versus a foreigner, and then how to negotiate that. But from a legal standpoint, companies want to hire local Vietnamese citizens because paperwork compliance is much easier.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, on that, you know, if you have dual citizenship, it's a very big plus for a lot of companies here. Similarly to right now, if you work in the US and you don't have, you know, US citizens, it will be very hard. So similar in Vietnam, if you have dual, great. You have the best of both worlds, actually. And if it comes down to negotiate a competitive salary package, there are multiple ways that we can structure it. Even though, for example, if you are an expat, there are expat benefits, like housing, like schooling, like transportation and such. However, if you are Vietnamese but you still qualify for that job, there are multiple ways we can restructure those allowances into different kind of cash components to make sure that your total comp does not go down or does not, become, less advantage versus, the expat citizenship. So I would say that having dual citizenships right now is, it's really the best of both worlds if you want to work in Vietnam. I see this hand, he has been raising for a while. Yes.
Did he give nannies to her?
So just
They don't get nannies.
Oh, you pay them?
Yeah, you have to find them yourself. Yeah.
a question to what you can say about restructuring the package. So that means, so for example, if I have like 2 citizenship and then I apply for a company, did you mean that there is no like standard career or legal process they have to go through? It's really up to the company that they will restructure the package. Depends on the candidate and depends on the negotiation.
If you use your Vietnamese citizenship to apply, you will be in a much easier route because they don't need to go through a very lengthy legal process to apply for work permit for you. And normally companies prefer that because they can block you in right away. They don't need to wait for the work permit application. And when it comes to the package negotiation, since you use your Vietnamese citizenship to apply, they treat you as Vietnamese talent, and they will offer a Vietnamese package. However, like I said, it still comes down to the way we structure the package and we negotiate the package to make sure that your total compensation is competitive with what you are earning. There are ways to do it, yeah. I see this. He has been raising for a while. Very persistent.
Hi, actually I have a question. What would be your advice for junior professionals who used to study and work in foreign countries, and especially like for a few years, and then they decided to return to Vietnam to find opportunities here to grow their career? What would be your advice for junior professionals?
For what professional?
Yeah, junior.
Okay.
Junior professionals who want to return and grow their career in Vietnam.
Okay, to clarify, how junior is junior? Like fresh into the market, is it first corporate career, or a few years into the industry?
I would say fresh.
Fresh straight out of
fresh,
university.
or at least, or even like a few years
Okay.
in the industry.
So again, just speaking on experience, so organizations like TechComback, for example, will have junior talent programs. So as recently as just last month, we onboarded 100 new young management associates. 100 of them were recently onboarded 1st of January. As a percentage, approximately 80% of them were local, so top university in Vietnam, such as FTU, etc., etc. But 20% of them were actually from overseas. Because of again our campaign to go overseas, people who've studied from Australia, Singapore, France, who want to come home, they have a competitive advantage. And when we think about our rigorous recruitment process, we had 6,000 applicants, taking 100, and our OVs who have that exposure overseas do exceptionally well. It always comes down to, again, the last point, which is in addition to your technical qualifications, what is the unique experience that you bring when studying overseas? The cultural elements, the mindset elements that we talked about before, your exposures in the industry where you've interned for MMCs, etc., etc. Those are the things that you want to be able to showcase into these large organizations. And I think in the market right now, there are a lot of large organizations that really are investing into young talent.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Well, I think, fresh or not fresh, junior or not junior, I think, if you are in the junior level and you come back to Vietnam, be prepared that you are entering a competition with everybody else.
100%.
Yeah, and so that's why, reflecting on what Stephen said, what are your unique value propositions? What do you bring? Your attitudes, your mindsets, your knowledge. And when you are junior, of course, when you come back to Vietnam, expect you are competing against, other people in Vietnam, right? So don't expect a very unrealistic salary, for instance, or don't expect that, because I study abroad, I need to be in mid-management position, I need to be in manager position. So I think, there was a panel that say the values of degrees abroad are going down in Vietnam, and I think that's quite true. If more than 20 years ago, people would treat you as this rare pearl coming back to Vietnam, but now you are a pearl in a bowl of lots of pearls. So yeah, prepare to compete equally with other fresh who are coming from Vietnam.
Thank you.
The next question is here. My name is Chris. I'm based in the U.S. and I have a background in banking. I have a question on what you mentioned earlier on about the digital transformation. There's a high demand for that type of talent. Could you go a step further and perhaps talk about what particular roles, especially for those that perhaps haven't done product or strategy in digital transformation? Is that are there roles for those that perhaps have lived through digital transformation, managed through digital transformation, and is there a demand for those type of roles?
Yeah, when I mentioned digital transformation, it's actually cutting across all areas of digital transformation, not just in product transformation. When I mention digital transformation in Vietnam, it means a lot of things. It can be product transformation, of course. A lot of the organizations here are trying to innovate and trying to do new products. But digital transformations are cutting across all areas of the organization. From HR is doing a lot of digital transformations, finance, marketing. So a lot of the function of a corporate are doing transformation in some way. So I think skill set in terms of project management, portfolio management, product of course, but also in change management, in communication management. All of those are needed. In the fields of digital transformation. So it doesn't have to be a technical product transformation. It can be across, and it can be in other areas of the organization as well, beyond just the product's function. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Hi, my name is Wang, and I'm based in the States as well. So my question for you, Ken, is if you're planning to establish a legal business entity within Vietnam, what is the general process to get it started? So I'm talking about like permits, applications, registration with the government, but also to what extent do you need to anticipate potentially, Hoilo or Ding Cafe or the government, or the encounters at the micro level and also at the systemic macro level, if that ever were to happen.
Sure.
How many minutes do we get, Nick?
You can go for 3 or 4 minutes.
Oh wow, that's a long time. Okay. So I always ask the question of what industry you're in, right? To determine what level of connections or relationships and how deep you need to go. Vietnam is in the WTO. There's a lot less restrictions on areas to do business now. There's probably about 10 to 20%, right? So I would say generally, you have to decide if you're going to open up a local company or a foreign company. If you're going to open a local, who's your local joint venture partner? Are you in a restricted area such as education, infrastructure, media? These things will impact what type of entity to form. But if I give you just generally, the first step is what's called the IRC, Investment Registration Certificate. And then you get the ERC, Enterprise Registration Certificate. And then from there, you open up the bank account, the tax ID, in order to run the business. So it goes in very detail on what you plan to do. For example, I'll give 2 examples that will give you really prime on what you need to do. If you open up a technology company, software development, you don't need any connections to the police or the government, right? It's an unrestricted area, foreigners can own 100%. You get your IRC, ERC, open your bank account, and you run. And then you try to find some tax incentives, like how I was doing, okay? Really, there's, really no corruption or under the table money that you have to give, right? Another example, you open up a bar. Totally different business. Well, Tan Dao has a restaurant too, so he has a kind of a bar, a license. So if you open up a bar, which is very easy, much easier in the United States or other countries. So now you're in a special license, you have to get a Vietnamese local that has to pass a test to serve alcohol. Then you have to pay the police for protection. You have to pay the tax authorities to come. If you sell balloons, then it's a totally different story. Right? So things that we think may be easy in the United States become really hard in Vietnam. Right? I mean, I own bars, so I know. I can tell you exactly how much you gotta pay the police per balloon, per penalty per month.
No balloons anymore.
Right? So no more balloons unless, if you know Ken. But, so things like that. So it's actually quite open. The big question I always get is, what is the corruption level in Vietnam? And I think Brooke said that now Vietnam is top 50% instead of bottom 50. So in the PCI, we're much better. It's more about, with the digital transformation, the digital IDs, the tax system getting better, there's less and less of that under the table money. And less on relying on relationships in order to get things done. So I'll say in general, 70% of the businesses that you will open will not require you to have relationships and do under the table. It's only the 30%, or if you want to do really big, like you want to do real estate development, you want to do infrastructure, you want to do a media company, things like that, or an entertainment company, then you need more relationships. So I say in general, Vietnam has become much better, much more transparent in the process of opening up a business in Vietnam and the tax system to regulate it.
So I'll take one last question. All right. Let me be the bridge.
My name is Quang Minh. I'm from Belgium. And my question is, if you had to give some advices for someone who wants to open a coffee shop in Europe, Belgium, what would it be?
Wait, sorry, you want to open a coffee shop in Belgium?
Yes.
What?
A Vietnamese coffee shop.
Ah, Vietnamese coffee shop. I'm trying to think.
Open up a Vietnamese coffee shop in Belgium.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. I haven't looked. I mean, first, I guess you would do market research to determine how many competitors are in the market. Typical market research. Definitely Vietnamese coffee. Sourcing it from Vietnam, you'll have the best coffee in the world. At least top 3. I would actually recommend get a Vietnamese franchise that is willing to open there. You already have a brand, Catinat, Coffee House, Duong. They're franchising all over the world. Would be a better strategy for you to open and then be able to expand and scale abroad because they're already branded. They've done a ton of research and development on their coffee, menus, and delivery. And it actually doesn't cost that much. I think a Duong shop can go for 100 to 150,000 US dollars, and you can open and get the full brand for the market.
Okay, thank you.
I'm doing the opposite. I'm bringing a Belgian restaurant to Vietnam.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's called Belgo. So that's a totally different strategy. Easier.
I'm with my brother actually, and he cooks really well.
Okay, go to Belgo. It's very good.
I think is there time for one last? Yeah, there's
one last question.
One
last question. Want to go for it?
First of all, I think this is my favorite part of the day. Thank you so much for speaking to the intrinsic assessment before coming back to Vietnam, because I feel like a lot of content out there are glamorizing like coming back to Vietnam and making it big because you're living on like USD or Europe dollars, and living on like Vietnam cost of living, right? Understanding that you have to be ready to move within 3 months if you were to consider to come back and apply for a company, or even during that process of applying for a company. What is that process like if you were hiring an expat from the US per se, and they're interviewing for a position in tech bank and they're ready to move within 3 months? Like, I know that currently in the US, there's several panels of interviews, like in one day you would go through probably 4 sessions of interviews just to apply for a position in one of the private companies.
So you're asking about recruitment process, like the steps in the recruitment process, normally what it looks like, right? I need to be frank with you that the recruitment process in Vietnam is really messy. It's super messy, and expect that to come. It can be super long, 6 months, 12 months, and it can be super fast. It really depends on, first it depends on the kind of positions you're interviewing for, and whether you are, the more senior you are, the faster it goes. Unlike a lot of people think the more senior you are, the longer it takes, but the more senior you are, the faster it goes, because the more senior you are, the less layer you have to go through before you reach the decision maker. So in Vietnam, normally the first interview normally happens with HR, human resources team, whether it's in recruitment teams, whether it's a HR business partner, whether it's the head of HR, and then they will get you to the line managers. And then if that position is to go to the CEO or the chairman, expect at least about 3 to 4 rounds, right? But the time between these rounds are very different. There are companies that move very quickly within these rounds, but there are companies that drags on the process for more than 6 months, just because they are busy, just because they have a lot of the options on the plate that they need to go through. So I would say that there's no standardized process in Vietnam. Sometimes when you go to the last round, you meet everybody, they still pause, and then you think it's dead, but 6 months later, they come back and they offer you. So expect that kind of messiness in the process, because a lot of these companies, they're waging different options, and sometimes you might be the best options, but they need to see other to confirm that you're the best options. So there's no standardized process here. Some company though, for example, Techcombank, I know that for very senior positions, they do go through a proper process of having a test, for example, Hogan test to test the leadership skills. And then after the Hogan test, then you see, this chairman and others. So those are normally what candidates would go through if they apply for jobs in Vietnam. And sometimes I got feedback from candidates that why didn't we give feedback to the candidates? And I would like to use the opportunities to ask for your understanding is that sometimes the clients are silent with us. Not no, not yes, just silent. And silent is because they are either thinking of whether they should offer that candidate, or whether they are, waging different options for that candidate, but they don't want to lose you just yet. So they just keep silent. So we have internal jokes around, within our firms that we need to think of different reasons of why we have no feedback, so that we don't lose you. So we really, really want to keep you, but we know that you need to have some updates. So we have to think of different reasons to share with you updates. But the reality behind that is that sometimes the client do not give us feedback, but they would keep you in the process for 6 months, up to 12 months. I have cases where I hire, a chief data officer from one of the largest banks in Vietnam, and the whole process took 18 months. The candidate finished everything, and we wait for 12 months to get an offer.
Oh wow.
So it's a really unstandardized process.
Can I have a super quick follow-up question? So I know that my current employer has a very long gardening leave. Like if I quit my job now, I would be out at least 8 months or a year. So what would be the advice for my case then?
Ooh.
And I actually had a negotiated breakdown with a consulting company here in Vietnam because I couldn't arrive on time.
That's very tough.
That's very tough.
That's very tough. I think your option would be you need to take a risk. You need to take a risk, whether you need to quit now and just serve your garden leave, and during that period start looking for a job, or you have to be really upfront to your employers. And I don't know what kind of industry you are in, but normally private equity. Normally, if you say that I have a garden leave of 8 to 10 months, they would put you in a very low category of interviewing. Yeah, they would prioritize others who can move quicker. So that would be my practical insight.
100%. Just to touch on that point before around, again, without defending the industry, without defending the organization, you have to also think about the return on investment. For us as an organization to go and look for OVs and look for expats, basically we've exhausted most of our options locally. So to do that, we have to make sure that you are perfect fit in terms of capabilities, functional capabilities, leadership capabilities, mindset, intrinsic motivations, all that stuff. Plus our internal procedures must mean that we have a point of comparison. So we might love you to death, you might be the perfect candidate, but our process might mean we have to have a point of comparison to say, are you better than someone else? Right? That internal process takes a lot of time and a lot of effort because there's a lot of negotiations and so forth, but it comes down again to the return on investment. Because once we commit, we are literally taking you, your family, and relocating the entire world across. Right? We are shipping what is your entire livelihood to Vietnam. So with that, again, we want to make sure that it's beneficial for the organization, but also beneficial for you as well. You can't fly halfway back up and go, sorry, we need gig.
Awesome. So we'd like to extend a special thanks to our panelists today for all the tough questions. Just to make this extra actionable, follow and subscribe to Ken's YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you're looking for legal advice, speak to Ken. If you're looking to start your recruitment process, you don't know where to start and how to brand your profile, we have a workshop tomorrow with Anne and the Janus team, and you can also chat with Anne separately. If you're looking to understand the OV corporate path in finance and banking, building a family in Vietnam, follow me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
I'll share you things that people don't usually do in the recruitment process.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.